Okay guys, what's up? How's it going? This is Enrique and this is Easy Things to Draw. This is going to be a long video, so it's going to be about an hour-ish. I'm going over this, illustration I did for an art show, and this is basically Mario in a Yoshi Mech. So let's kind of start getting into it. I'm going to go through the entire process of what I did. In the beginning, right there, I start out with just a simple line art, and in case you want to know what I'm using Adobe Photoshop CS6, and I'm gonna write all this stuff in the description for you too if you want to get into this or you haven't got into this. I'm using a Wacom tablet, which I've mentioned a couple of times. You need to do this with a tablet. You can do this with a mouse, but it's kind of crazy to do with a mouse. It's so much faster and easier to do with a tablet. A Wacom tablet. And I use an Intuos 3. I think I use a really old one, and I got it off, I believe I got it off eBay for roughly $40 because it didn't have the pen with it, you know what I mean? It's pretty old. So it doesn't really matter, in terms of how old they are, I don't think. But I would get an Intuos, I know there's another kind that are more for photography. The sensitivity is different. I think that's the bamboo. But get the Intuos, 3 or up, 3 and up or something. I also have a Cintiq, but oddly enough, I use the Intuos way more. So this was originally for a mech art show, and I want to, be upfront. This piece, thing you saw earlier, that was only about 85% done. I couldn't finish it. I tried. Just time's up, and I was like, what, time's up. I'm just gonna make a video out of it. Time's up. I'm just gonna have to move on to other stuff. Just consider it a learning process. But I wanted Yoshi to be driving some sort of mech. And I'm sorry, Yoshi. I wanted Mario to be driving some sort of mech, and I thought, he rides Yoshi, and I figured the concept's easy enough. I wanted some way for Mario to stand out, even though Yoshi is bigger. So right here I'm using layers segments, and the dimensions, essentially, I didn't really use any particular dimensions, but I knew I wanted to frame it in an 18 by 24 frame. So originally when I started a new file, you can go to new file, I opened it and I put it at 18 by 24 inches, which is like a giant freaking file, so I had to shrink it down. When I'm first working on these files, I work on them in a very low resolution thing, on the first few steps, like that sketch underneath. And I work out the vague positioning, vague sketches. And then when I want to start getting to the line art, like here, in a new layer, I will, up the resolution, up the size of the whole thing. And for this, for the brush settings, I changed the brush settings around. I ended up kind of, I put the brush settings as more of a solid color. You know what I mean? I had to change the brush setting. I only use 2 brushes for stuff like this. I use the hard brush and the soft brush, and that's it. I don't use texture brushes, which I should. I'm just tracing over my old line art, and sometimes I'll run into these things like the hand right there where I regret not putting more detail into the layer underneath, where I didn't quite work it out as well as I could have, because I always feel that, I was like, I could have worked that out a little bit more. Or, you kind of notice, you're like, oh, I got lazy. As I'm talking right now, as I'm also going through this, I'm erasing the layer behind it, too, because it kind of gets in the way. So I switch to the last layer, and I just start erasing stuff as I have things a little bit more solid, a little bit more worked out. These digital videos, I don't often post digital. I'm going to start posting these a lot. Mostly, I'm going to post it here, but I'm going to post a lot of these as well on my other channel, on Sketch Monster channel. I'll link that somewhere over here on the screen. So that's where most of those digital ones are going to be, most of the digital. Not all of them, but most of them are going to be there. So if you want to see more digital stuff like this, it's going to be over there mostly. And going into the nose here. And so what I was thinking with a tech was how do I make this, because I love drawing tech, if you ever look at my Instagram, I have a ton of tech. What I was trying to figure out, how do I make this, you're thinking of design, right? Because Yoshi's a typically round character, so is Mario. And I wanted to make this round tech not too overly angular and high tech, So I was kind of fighting that the entire time, where I was thinking that isn't techy enough, or Like that's just a round shape. That's not tacky enough. I wanted a gun blast to be coming from his stomach, from Yoshi's stomach, and it kind of kept looking phallic and weird, you know. So I just try to just kind of mess around with it. Also, right here, I'm thinking really hard about the perspective of things. You know, if you don't know anything about perspective, go check out my perspective video. Perspective's such a big thing, and I caught that with my buddy, and he might be listening to this for all I know. Lyndon, you know, you know him. Should he'll post things. You know, like when you're drawing a singular character like this, you don't think perspective applies, but it applies a lot still. You know, it's just on a different level. You know, like how far is his foot going to be sitting back if he's standing or moving? You know. And for example, this gun, if it's coming out of his chest, at what angle should it be pointing at that it'll be, you know, close enough to the perspective that it would be in real life? You know, you can't just have that thing kind of pointing weird in, you know, like at the camera. I guess you could and say it swivels, but it would still have to grab onto something inside of his stomach. So I kind of think of it like that. The gun was really hard to work out. So you can see the gun sketchier than it's almost like the gun is a step back from Mario himself. Or even like the upper part of Yoshi. This video, just to kind of like sidestep. Oh yeah, I remember this. I shrank the whole thing because I just needed more room to work with. So I just shrank it a little bit. I thought maybe I should see one of his feet. Zooming in, and these ellipses are hard to do with just like by hand, you know, by freehand. So I'm just kind of doing this again to work. I still haven't worked it out. And as like I said, make a new layer. I'll lower the opacity on the layer below it. I'm putting in some angles here. I gotta sketch more tech on the computer because I don't do that a lot. I gotta do that a lot more. Continue to move forward and trying to work things out because I don't draw guns a lot either. That's something I want to, like, you know, another weakness I really want to pinpoint is guns. I'm continuing to kind of like make more rivets and layer. I'm trying to think of like how can I make this more complicated looking, you know, without breaking it. And I'm drawing along the forms, you know, because I wanted that thing to look like it's popping out, like, I don't know, like some kind of kid's toy or something. And maybe it has like a little gate on the upper part of his chest there. Continuing to kind of work things out. And this is a period, I don't remember the extended period I worked on this, but I worked on this for, you know, over several days trying to figure stuff out. Sometimes I'd step away, you know, for a while, things like that. And you know, you kind of see a lot of new things when you come back to something. You're just like, wow, like what was I thinking? Or when you flip the image, you're like, what? You know, you think that you see things with a fresh eye view. I think I got the ellipses ultimately wrong here on the gun, on the cannon or whatever, because it's just not. I don't know. Some of the ellipses were not looking right to me after. You know what I mean? You know, I'm not really fighting the software, because the software is something that I've used a lot. Right now I'm creating an ellipse with an ellipse tool, and then I'm just turning it. I'm changing the radius and even the size of it. I'm trying to create a small one within it. I'm drawing a barrel within a barrel to give it some sort of like a little bit of depth. I wasn't gonna make like I didn't want to make like a tired, boring barrel, so I wanted to put stuff out of it. But I think ultimately that might have messed it up a little bit. You know, I think it would have been. It was kind of hard to control the perspective on that. Continuing in this section here, trying to be aware of. I'm trying really hard to be aware of like whatever angle's doing. But you know. It just, you know, things kind of get mixed up sometimes. Oops. Sit down here. Continue to move on. And this is the place I had the most difficulty in the entire picture, you know. And this is just the line art stage, too. The line art stage is kind of what you're going to build your color upon. So don't lessen the importance of the line art. You know, the line art is really important, at least when you're working this way. Some people don't do that. Some people go in purely in a painterly method, and I've talked about that in other videos. if you go in a purely painterly method, it can work. You know, it really can. It's a little, you know, debatable. Well, not debatable, but I think when you start working in a painterly method first, at least for me only, because I can't do that well, is sometimes it starts to look like mush, and you got to straighten out the mush. Some people work great like that. Some people work amazing that way. If you look at like Craig Mullins or, well, Craig Mullins obviously, right? Or you know, you look at certain digital artists, it's like, wow, it's just like, it blows your mind, like how well they can control that. Getting to fiddle around here. I think in the process I did change my ellipses on the back part of the barrel a little bit much. I know it sounds like I'm being really anal about this, but you kind of have to do that with perspective, and especially you talk about tech, right? You talk about something that's hard and not organic. You know, some people love organic, and including myself. I love organic because you can kind of cheat. The perspective can be about right, and you can get away with it. With tech, this is like a straight, you know, line, metallic object. You know, if the perspective is wrong on it, it's going to be very obvious to people that know what's going on. So I'm using the warp tool to kind of change the perspective a little bit. I just noticed my perspective is a little weird. So I was using that warp tool. If you haven't used that, you should use it. I think they had it on, I think that's from Adobe CS5 and up. I think they started using that warp tool. I really like it a lot. Really, really valuable tool. I use it plenty. It does kind of warp other stuff though, so you have to be careful because you can screw up. So right here I'm taking the back sketch, and I thought the other leg was sticking out too far, and I thought, okay, if the back leg would be showing a lot less if it was sticking out the back there. So that's essentially what I changed. I'm going in here, you know, very, I would say methodically, kind of like I'm thinking of tech right now, and I wanted like some rivets on his leg, and I'm kind of going into the way I draw tech like when I sketch. And these are just kind of these patterns and these things that I have in my head. These patterns I draw all the time. And I wanted his leg to look really robotic. What basically starts happening here, and I'm not sure at what part it starts happening, but I'm not digging this for this design. It doesn't look round enough, what I'm doing right now. It just looks too angular and too warlike. I mean, I know there's supposed to be a battle. But it's looking a little too crazy for me right now, and you know, I start kind of debating that. You know what I mean? Going into the shoulder now, what invariably happens, especially when you're working on a long illustration, is usually that you get tired of one area and you start moving to other ones. And that's kind of what's been going on. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. And then it's kind of going over the shoulder. And again, I'm thinking like in round shapes. That's the thing. The design language doesn't make sense. So I think this is about the part where I start erasing kind of lines that are way too angular. There's just too many angular lines. Way too many angular lines. I start pulling down to the leg, and I would like maybe like a chamber here too, but nothing that kind of again dominates the design, or again starts to change the design language of everything, and then I have to like go back and change it all. I'm thinking about whether I want spikes for feet. That was also a debate in my head as well. Like, what is it that I'm gonna do? Going into the other arm, the nostril. I thought the most worked out part of this entire thing, at least within the line art, would be the actual head of Yoshi, because it's easy, you know, it's identifiable. There's only a couple of changes there, and then I thought it was fine. You know, it was working out okay. Trying to make sure the perspective makes sense on this contraption on his face. The whole thing, I'm thinking perspective in the back of my head, you know, the whole time. Like, does this really look like it's connected to that? Or does this look like it's in front of that? Does this look like it's inserting into that? Or does this look like it, you know, they're linked together? And so that's the question I asked the whole thing. The whole thing. Most, like, well, the whole Yeah, pretty much the whole thing. You know, you'll see me bounce back and forth sometimes between the spikes or the hand. You know, the hand is put there as just like a point to keep, you know, stuff together. And again, I redo the feet. I wanted them kind of more separate. I needed those more round as well. Like I said, I took away the spikes, and I was like, okay, I just need these kind of like, you know, nubs so I could grab onto things. I just can't imagine that design having stuff like that. I moved the leg back even more. And this is a point where, because I had Mario, the line art of Mario was on a separate layer. You know, I consider him mostly finished. And this is where I start combining those layers into one line art. Again, I'm using my ellipse and trying to alter it in a way that it might be okay. And I'm putting a kind of a jetpack on Yoshi's back. And again, the thing is, the tighter you set up your line art, the less work you have to do in the next stages. In every next stage, you'll do less work the more you just do it up front. Which I think, you know, makes, you know, sometimes it makes you have to remember not to get too lazy up front, because you know it's going to come back and bite you later. I wanted Mara sitting on a seat, but I also wanted that space a little bit open, so I put like this double seat thing. I wasn't really sure what I was doing there. Maybe like a little tiny windshield. Again, I keep checking things by switching layers on and off. I just keep double checking, like, okay, does this look okay, does this look okay, etc. Yoshi has a tail, so I kind of put that way back there. And then what I'm doing here is I'm doing what I do, and you've seen this in a lot of my drawings too, the 1, 2, 3 method. The, you know, if something's coming in front of another, I'll put like a darker line, or I'll put a darker line around the contour. When I put a slightly darker line, it makes things slightly pop forward, because I wanted at any point for this, when you're doing stuff like this, usually, and I know I'm not really working like that right now, but at least as far as the line art goes, I wanted this to be okay as presentable line art before I started throwing color into it, you know? I wanted someone to would be able to take it and color it themselves if they wanted, you know, or something. It needed to be understandable in terms, at least up until the line art for me, you know? So I wanted the line art to be decent. And then when you work into it with paint, right, with color, that's when it starts becoming a mess, right? It starts going crazy. Because then you have to work out, because you look at line art and you think, wow, I worked that out pretty well. And then when you start painting it, you'll be like, wow, I didn't work this out nearly enough, you know? You have to go into it with more kind of detail, or what's this going to reflect off of, or how is the light hitting this? What would this do? And you don't have a really reference source, so you have to do it out of your head. Or use like other reference sources, which will come up in the future of this video. Stick around, because I'm going to put some of the intermission here. I feel like it's, you know, just won't be a long stretch. I'll put a little intermission halfway through at the 30-minute mark, which is 10 minutes from now. Okay, I start coloring things in. Usually what I do is I do one of two things. One, I'll grab a new layer, and I'll put like a multiply layer, and I'll paint over the line art, right? And it'll show the line through. Or what I do, and I believe I'm doing that here, I'm actually, well, I started doing the multiply method, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do something else. What I do is I grab a new layer, and I put it underneath the line layer, like underneath it, you know, like, because it's not, you won't be able to touch the layer above it. And then I just color it like that with regular color. And I kind of like that better, to be honest. I keep pushing in here, checking my colors. I want some Yoshi-esque colors. You know, off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember what he was colored. I should have just looked at a photo for this, honestly, for the color. I mean, you know, obviously, I keep saying the word obviously, but, You know, there's also you're using. It's going to be a little bit more of a real world interpretation. So the colors will be a little duller than they would be in like Mario, let's say, but not too much duller. Mario has such a cool color scheme. Like his color scheme is so iconic. You know, it's very, I don't know, Superman-y, America. I don't know. Even though he's Italian, right? Italian. Very good primary colors on that character. I like it a lot. Sometimes I'll take the line art out again to double check. There's all these warnings coming from my computer. I gotta update my computer. Oh, here's another thing. I didn't really mention this earlier. Oh, okay. Let me mention this right now because it's coming up. I'm throwing a layer behind it. I'm throwing a gradation behind it. And I want a gradation behind it because it's a contrast. The front of it's going to be painterly and the back of it's going to be, you know, like a solid boom, like gradation. Like he's in the sky, like I don't know what. Right now it's showing through, but I'm going to probably fix that. I start grabbing like the Lasso tool and start selecting stuff, and I just start doing it that way. It's letting me see what is kind of coming through. Okay, so let me talk about the computer I'm using. The computer I'm using is just a regular PC. It's a ThinkPad laptop. Let me see. It's an Intel Inside Core 17. I don't think it's very powerful, honestly. So, you know, it's about a couple years old. You don't need a massively powerful computer to use Photoshop. It helps, you know, with lag, especially when your file size starts getting crazy. When your file starts getting really big, then it starts getting like to be an issue. But at this point, you know, I'm perfectly happy with it. I haven't put anything too giant into the hard drive or anything. I mean, into the computer, file-wise. And I like that gradation. I'm making it blue, like I said, just sky blue. And one thing about the gradation, I always throw gradations darker from the top and then lighter from the bottom. I don't know why. I just like it. I think it looks good, usually, on almost everything. That's just the way I like it, you know, like that. I don't know. Dark from the top, lighter at the bottom. And it's the reverse for the character. I think what do they call it? I don't think they call it counter shading because that's what sharks have. I'm talking, but it's reverse for the other way. For the character itself, usually gets darker from the bottom, lighter at the top, and then you throw those together and it kind of looks nice. Pushing in the seats here. I think I'm going to multiply layer here. Yeah, I am going to multiply. I think I'm going in an overlay layer. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to throw some shadowish stuff. You know, I know the light's gonna be coming from above, but I want to throw some shadow in there. And now I'm getting into actually painting. You know, now I feel like I'm getting a new layer after that, and I'm actually trying to paint the way I would like on canvas or things like that. And I'm struggling with where would the focal point be? His eyes are so bright; they're basically white. Would I bring out some, you know, redness in his cheeks eventually? Where would the spotlight be? Obviously, probably in his nose. I want the eye to have some kind of shine as well. So I'm pushing that. So I kind of go deeper into the eyes right now, and I'm essentially kind of disappearing into like rendering mode. And a lot of things going through my head right now. I think this is one of the hardest parts for me, even though I do render a lot. For whatever reason, when I'm rendering a character in an environment, it is, well, not even an environment really, he's just kind of next to a machine. It's kind of hard to balance out what with the darks and the lights and things like that for me. So I'm trying to push that a little bit more and do that more often. Underside of his hat. Going into the sides of things. I want his mustache to, I mean, his mustache is completely black. It's a very graphic image, and it's kind of one of the things that really makes Mario stand out. So I kind of do want to leave that there, mostly black. I'm trying to soften out the edges now in this kind of like vague shadow pattern I put in. So which one of you guys, how many of you guys out there use digital, by the way? I don't really know who uses digital. My channel is primarily very traditional. I don't use a lot of, I mean, I use a lot of digital, but I don't post a lot of digital. I post very little. Who out there uses it? Let me know. I'm very curious. I'm putting a little bit of rim lighting on the outside of his nose, which is just kind of a technique I use a lot. I wanted to have some kind of expression. I'm thinking like his hair needs to be darker as well, because if it's under the side of that hat, it's, you know, a little light. And at this stage, you're almost kind of thinking like, what do I pull back on? Because you want to do so much that you feel like, okay, this is going to be too time consuming to do this. What do I pull back on, or do I spend more time on it? It's just it's up to you. Going down his lower mouth. I want to put like maybe some shadow over his tongue, which is kind of making it look purple, unfortunately. Trying to smooth things out. This is a very styly point, you know, when you're rendering stuff here. It's very, very, very style oriented, you know. There's a lot of like this opinion stuff, you know. There's almost no, I mean, there's definitely right and wrong answers per se, like generally, you know, where's the light hitting, stuff like that. But sometimes you're kind of like, what can I do next, or where do I go from here? And that's the stuff that you kind of, that's why you do studies of other artists, you know, like maybe Rembrandt, stuff like that. You do studies so that you kind of have an idea of what to do when you get to that point. Going into his teeth more. I think ultimately later on in the drawing I decided to just get rid of his teeth because I thought they were just standing out too much. I remember another thing about this particular art show that we were doing. For this one, I remember I wanted him fighting another mech, maybe Luigi and some other kind of mech, and a Toad mech. But I didn't have time. You know, I knew you kind of know your time restrictions based on what you have to do. You know, if I say I'm going to do something in like a few days, I'm not going to do anything I think is out of my ability to do. You know, I'm not going to make like a giant area, you know. You know, you can also do things to challenge yourself. My friend Lyndon, he does art shows specifically to have a deadline to hit, you know, and it helps him hit those deadlines a lot. And he's expanding his portfolio because he joins these small art shows where they say you got to have it by this time. And so that really helps in that way. I've seen that help him extremely. I would recommend that if you guys live in a city that does have a lot of little art shows. Luckily, we live in San Diego, which has a lot of little art shows and different, you know, establishments like restaurants and bars and things like that. And so we do a bunch. And like I said, it really helps us out. You know, you just need that push sometimes. I'm going into his hand, his glove, trying to work some things out there. And kind of, again, going to his nose. What I ended up doing there is I ended up throwing sometimes I use a mask layer, I think a clipping mask, and that makes it so when I put that line in there, I won't really go outside the lines of that other layer. And I was rushed about it because we're trying to hit this deadline. For example, like the surface of Yoshi, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to make him more metallic or make him a dull, like not so shiny surface. Later on I tried to make him shinier, so that would be one thing. Sometimes you think you're making stuff dark and you're not. You're like, what? You know, you gotta like, how does that relate to that? You know, it's a lot of questioning. It gets easier and easier the more you do it. That's why you do so much mileage. You know, you do mileage over and over again, so it does get easier as time goes on. And we're at the halfway point now. Let's hit a break. So I would say for the rest of this commentary, a lot of it is going to be very much. It's not so much it's more like the painting part of it now. You know, the technical stuff, I wouldn't say goes out the window, but a lot of it isn't there as much anymore as it is at the start. I feel like the technical stuff usually is around the start for me. And then at this point I just kind of like start zoning out, you know. And I'm using the Lasso tool. That's a good tool to use. It's a great tool to use. It essentially contains and selects things, you know, very carefully. Going into his mustache. So at this point, I kind of zone out, honestly. I just zone out and just start painting and not thinking. I mean, I definitely think. Sorry, I'm thinking the whole time. But you are kind of on this mild autopilot, and I'm zoning in and out. There are some bigger changes that come along that I make, and I'll show you in a moment. All right. I'm using the Lasso tool like crazy in this stage. The Lasso tool, like I said, is I wouldn't say it's invaluable, but one of the biggest things I have, one of the biggest differences I've run into, especially with digital as opposed to like traditional, would be the kind of like staying in the edges kind of thing. On paper, you can, I don't know what it is, but you can kind of grip it more and pull a straight line. You know, if you really have to with your arm, you know, you're really using your muscle area. With that on digital, you for a straight line, it'd be wise to use like the tool, like the Lasso tool, or using the hold shift button or something like that. I'm gonna write as many. By the way, I'm gonna remind you. Look in the description. I'm gonna write as many command keys that I use in the description. I hope it's useful to you. I really want you. Here's another thing, by the way. And if you're still listening by now. Tell me some stuff that you use. You know what I mean? If you use Photoshop, if you use Adobe Photoshop, please let me know. I like new tips too. You know what I mean? I'm learning new stuff all the time. I actually know very little about Photoshop. I only know the bare essentials that I need to kind of get by. But like for example, I didn't know the mask tool till like lately, which is crazy, I think, but I didn't. Again, going through and marking stuff and filling it in. The Lasso tool, like I said, it's a great tool. You know, I'm trying to get rid of all the lines, which kind of in itself becomes a labor. I might just turn the lines off next time. But it is kind of like, you know, it's a bit, you know, a mixture, you know, because you know definitively you blocked in that line when you've blocked in that line. You know, like you'll know, you can see it very definitively. I've always been like, when I'm in terms of my painting habits, I've always wanted to paint a little closer to real, you know. Although it's just like a habit that I paint in line a lot, and I think that's due with my caricature background. Whoever, if you've been listening to the channel for a while, you know that I used to be a caricature artist at SeaWorld, and that was all line. So, I mean, I use line as a tool to achieve what I need, but I really like the non-line stuff, you know. But I'll probably, you know, like I said, obviously I love line, you know, but I'm more of a painterly guy. I'd rather be, but I just, for whatever my natural tendency is to use a line a whole lot more. Putting that M on his hat, just kind of like the marker there. At that point, because I realized, I'm like, oh yeah, he doesn't have the M on his hat, so I just picked any M and put it on there. I know it's probably not the right font, but I just want to throw it in there. I'm switching back and forth between the soft and the hard brush. If I went out there, I've been drawing a lot of Mario lately on my own even. I think it's because of Super Smash Brothers. I'm like obsessed with that game. I'm not that good right now, but my friend comes over a lot and we play it. And I would like to get better at that. It's one of those things where I'm like, I should really practice, you know, a certain character and try to get good. But then you realize, you're like, oh my god, there's all this time, you know, that you could have been painting. You could have been doing something a little bit more constructive. There's not enough hours in the day to do everything I want to do, you know. I want to play more video games. I want to, you know, watch more movies. It's just not enough hours in the day sometimes. I got rid of that back section behind Mario there. It's like the side part of the panel, and I knew it probably wouldn't make sense perspective-wise, but I just need to get rid of it. I wanted the Mario to hit the edge of that frame of the contour of the character. So I wanted Mario to hit the edge of that. So I just got rid of that backside. It's funny, like when I was recording this video, sometimes I would just leave and get lunch and then come back. So sometimes it'll slow down a little bit. This one's slowing a little bit long, actually. I'll try to phase through this. Going back to the eyes a little bit more. It's just a constant push-pull until you have it right, you know? And I think this is the part that I connect with more on a traditional level, right? Like you kind of think of like traditional versus digital. There's really no versus, you know. Most guys I know do both. You know, I think at some point I honestly feel like you pretty much have to do both. Put a little bit more dark under his hat. Also kind of a big Mario Kart fan. I'm like a huge Mario Kart fan. I'm almost a bigger Mario Kart fan than I am a Smash Brothers fan, even though I know there's more in Smash Brothers to kind of like practice, and you know there's a little bit more depth to it because they updated a lot more. Well, not a lot more, but I'm a huge Smash Brothers fan. It's weird how I'm more of a Nintendo fan as an adult than I was as a kid, which is odd. I had the 64 as a kid, but I had a Genesis, not a Super Nintendo, way back. I never had an NES. Going into the hand more, and I want to put some design elements in the hand to just not make it look as is. So I started throwing these little rivets in there as well. And these little tiny like marks, these little tiny lines in pen are easy, you know? They're easy in pen, but they're a little bit harder in digital. I don't know what it is. So that's why I'm making it a note to sketch more in digital. On a side note, I'm really getting that podcast up now. I'm trying to actually get a camera for the podcast. So I'm trying to get a little bit more of a camera because I want to show people sitting down and talking about art, and so I've been kind of getting that going. Mostly for me, it's been learning the software, learning the soundboard, you know, things of that sort. This takes up a tremendous amount of space recording this stuff on your computer. That would be one complaint I have. But once I post it to Facebook, to YouTube, I mean, once I edit it, I'll keep that edited version, probably get rid of the original parts of it, like the recorded files, because I have to record them, then convert them, and then, you know, kind of throw them into editing. Just at this point, I'm straightening things out everywhere. Stuff that I thought I had figured out online, but it's just it's just natural to see more mistakes as you go into it because you're just well, I don't know. Actually, I think it's natural to see less mistakes, but for whatever reason, I'm seeing more as I'm kind of working areas out. I'm like, okay, that doesn't look right. That doesn't look right. Why doesn't that look right? Okay, it must be the perspective. What could that be? You know. Shadow pattern under his arm. If you like tech and you want to learn more tech, honestly, I would look at Darren Kwok. That guy's amazing. He's like one of my art idols. I got his book lately, and it's like insanely cool, you know. God, I'm so amazed by it. But like his design language is insane, you know. Continuing to go in further. I'm putting a shine in his eye, you know what I mean? Because I'm trying to figure out what am I going to pick out. Where am I going to pick out a white within that area, you know? And it's a lot, like I said, it's a lot of debating, balancing. That's why color's so hard for a lot of people. Color's not super hard, but it's definitely pretty hard. It's one of my weakest things, and it's also something that people fear a lot of. I think you got to get rid of that fear and just jump into it. And just see what happens, and then see where you gotta, once you jump into something, you'll see where you make your alterations, you know? The furrows of the face. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of interesting because I almost feel like I'm running out of things to talk about. Like, what can I talk about that relating to this picture? Like, a lot of it is just mushing things back and forth. What's going through my head, you know? Mushing this, mushing that. In terms of another event that's going on in my personal life, like, you know, in terms of art, I'm trying to, or me and Lyndon, or especially me, I'm trying to get in a booth at the comic convention. Sorry, the San Diego Comic Con next year, but I don't have the money for a booth, you know, so that's kind of bugging me. I really want to. It's like $3K, I think, for a booth. I want to go there and promote, you know, like my channel, my art, stuff like that, and maybe split it with somebody. But it's pretty hard. Pretty hard. So I'm gonna check out other conventions. Conventions is something I really want to start doing, though. Putting in a little bit of darks. I think my old habit was to make things a little bit too high contrast, or there's too many lights next to darks, like harsh ones. So I'm trying to pull back at that. Even this one has a little bit of that, but it was just too much. Going in, and like I said, a lot of it is I want to get rid of that line. So I'm throwing these lights on his Yoshi spikes and on that contraption on his back. Working the gradations is really fun. You know, working like from dark to light. There is, like I said, a satisfactory feeling about it. Some people get it from line. Some people get it from like kind of designing very pretty line art. I get it from like rendering. Again, just kind of fixing things, kind of maybe round them out more. I'm using a soft brush here. Putting in some lights underneath that to have some maybe reflected light from, not even, yeah, I guess some ambient light. Sorry, ambient light from the surrounding surfaces. And I'm going into places now that I'm neglecting. For example, the foot, the kind of leg here. I was completely neglecting it the whole time, and it, you know, shows. You know, it's just like, oh, I got to get to that. You know, that's when you really learn, when you want to paint everything. It's like you really learn. You're like, oh man, I don't want to work on that, but you have to. You know. And through this, I'm kind of combining layers. You know, like merging layers back and forth sometimes becomes a mess, so you have to kind of like just you know, like I said, the organization is a really hard part for most people, you know, keeping track of what layers what, and I'm in that boat too, because sometimes I just want to flatten the whole thing and just want to paint over it, you know. I think that definitely comes from, again, a traditional background. Right here, balancing out a couple of things. I'm dealing with very like pure mech stuff here. Like just pure entire mech, and I'm like tracing out everything in the that tool, the Lasso tool. The Lasso tool, I mean, some teachers called it like the best tool ever made on, you know, Photoshop. If you're not using it, I would definitely try using it. So let me go into another mild tale about this. Along with this podcast I'm trying to start, I wanna start a feeling of kind of, I don't know how to say it, just fun among the podcast. And this is not manufactured. That's why I'm grabbing friends of mine to participate. I'm asking them about it. One of them has a very severe accent, and I don't think she can be on it, but I do want my other friends on, and I would like their feedback. We're gonna break it up into segments. But so doing that, I've been having these gatherings at my house with just friends of mine to hang out and talk, talk art or anything specific like that. And it's been going really well. I've actually been having painting sessions, where people come over to my house and we all paint and hang out and talk. It's like remarkably good. It definitely a sense of community in the art community. That's really important. Because we can all just be kind of weird, right? You tend to be. This tends to be an introverted field. It's people who I guess are in their heads most of the day. So, it might be harder for some people to make friends. Sometimes it depends. I've seen the most antisocial guys become better faster, but I mean that can be good if that's your thing. I need some sort of social life, or else I'll lose my mind. So I mean that's kind of up to you, really. And like, there's nothing better than having social artist friends. That's great. And continue going to this hand and trying to make it shinier, if possible. There's still a lot of little things that bug me too. There's a lot of little lines flaring out that bother me. When you're looking at your own stuff, you always want to be perfectionist, and I get that feeling, right? I know what you're talking about. I wouldn't say completely let it go, but there's definitely some things you have to learn to let go. So, I mean, I guess you have to weigh that option. Like, do I let it go or not? And there's no particular order I'm going over here. I'm just kind of going all over. Mostly sticking to the points where, like Mario's face or where he's sitting on Yoshi. That's usually where I guess I'm focusing most of my attention, because I think it's a good idea. I need to. I'm probably going to take some of the shine out of Mario's mustache, because I think it's deterring from that very iconic shape of his mustache. So I started pulling that a little bit. And the way I color select, I actually haven't talked about that, so that'd be perfect. So when I'm painting and I color select something, I usually color select the main color in the center or whatever middle ground color. And then what I'll do is, if you look at that box of color, I'll pull it down and to the right. You know what I mean? If I want a darker color. And it depends how dark I want it, right? That'll depend on how far I pull it that direction. And if I want something lighter, I'll pull it up and to the left. And that is generally how I'll do it when I pick a color, when I'm trying to render something. Going into the kneecap area, which now that I look at it doesn't really make any sense, because the one one's aimed down and the other one's not, so it's too bad. Going into the other hand, oh, that's another weird thing. Sometimes I'll go really far into a painting and realize I just left one area completely blank and not worked on. I find that very funny. I almost don't know why that happens, I think it's when you're focused on one thing, even something right next to it just doesn't seem real almost. So you got, you should be aware of that, like I said. And I'm flipping back and forth constantly. And at this point, I think the layers are getting too crazy, and I want to start figuring it out. I'm using the warp tool again. And I'm coloring over this. I was gonna leave this originally metallic, but I decided like I gotta start bringing in the color from somewhere else, you know, and then matching it. So I made that orange. I'm you know, also debating on how dark I want this character, you know, like where I want this. Like where is it that I like how dark do I want the bottom of the character to be? Because I know he's flying essentially. Would the ambient light color his lower body, you know, more because it's close to the ground? And then we're coming into a part here where I'm like deciding very carefully, like, how much light do I want to come from the bottom, you know? How much light's going to be bouncing off to, you know, come toward right back underneath the Yoshi symbol, the Yoshi face. And I also want some light, like I said originally. I don't know if I even talked about that. I want light to come from the control panel that Mario's sitting at. Continue to use the lasso tool. Still fixing things up. This stage is pretty boring, I think, to watch, in all honesty. I understand, so that's why I'm thinking of, like, situation. Oh, okay. Here's something. This is a stage where I wanted a reference point for shiny green objects. So I started looking up ornaments and stuff like that. And I just pulled them off of Google. And I was trying to make it, you know, like trying to look at that. And I noticed, like, you know, there's some black spots toward the top. And, you know, I was just trying to take some of that reference, like, material, like, and some of that info and do it, you know? And I'm throwing in I throw in that light in the nose, which I later get rid of. Now I'm going in with a color dodge tool, and I love that tool. It makes things look really nice and colorful. I'm going with certain places just around, like certain things I want to concentrate on. I'm going in with. And the stage is mostly observing, like what is it that this round object is doing, and what can I pull into it. Continue to work down. Putting in some darker areas within the dark. And I'm thinking now, like how dark can I pull the dark in general? How dark can I pull the darks? And will that make it look shinier? Or will it just look like it's, you know, made of something else? And this is where I'm very much experimenting. Continue to kind of go into the arm, because the arm is so forward, I just feel like it's a focal, like some kind of secondary focal point. So I guess that's why I concentrate more on the arms and the legs, really. So, you know, this is kind of how I use reference source generally. You know, if I need a very specific element of it, I'll do it. Or, like I said, if you need, I guess, generally, you know, you look at stuff because kind of like, usually it's in the design stage. Like if I need a Jaguar or something like that, I'm like, I forgot what a Jaguar even looks like, or something like that. I usually use it like that. I haven't made a video about using reference, which I will try to do soon. So I have these pictures up like this on the screen at all the time, you know. I save them and then I put them there. I don't like just flipping back between Google and that. I want it next to me. There's another thing that you have to do. You have to be careful about not being a slave to the reference, because sometimes you'll try to hit it and you're like, oh, I can't do it. I can't hit it. You know, you can't hit exactly the reference. Sometimes you can, but I would say be careful about that, because it will slow you down immensely. So you should watch out about that. What generally you should do is, I usually just start drawing out of my head and just start doing it. And then if I hit like a hard roadblock, then I use reference, you know. Trying to fix the ellipse here. Trying to fix the ellipse. It's going into this ball shape a little bit more. I'm also kind of thinking about where I was, what I was thinking at the time. I did this, like I said, over the course of 3 days, and this is the day after. So now I throw a small gradation at the bottom, because I'm thinking like, all right, there has to be some ambient light toward the bottom. And I'm fooling around with that. But then I kind of look at it and I'm like, okay, if I throw this ambient light over it, I'm going to have to keep messing around with the image below it. So I better try to finish the image below it a little bit more before I throw some ambient light over it. For this, I want like kind of an ignition kind of look. I should have thrown more white in there. I think now that I look at this. Like I said, using that tool is a pain. Using the ellipse tool, I think, is a pain sometimes. So now I'm trying to find a brush for the clouds, and I'm using I don't remember the exact brush. I was using just any kind of like textured brush. There's a ton of them. I can't quite remember. I wanted to make it look like he was flying around, or you know, put some clouds like he was zooming through, like, what do you call that? Those contrails, I think you call it. And another thing I wanted to do was throw some a little bit more dark behind Mario to make him pop out a little bit more, just around him. And just throw it on top a little bit more. I thought I just needed to throw the whole a little bit darker overall, the sky in the back, to make the character pop forward a little bit. And we're pretty close to the end, honestly. Now I'm just kind of doing some last minute tweaks. Nothing majorly important. Like I said, this was probably about 80% done, and my deadline hit. So this is honestly where I'm going to finish it, because I need to move on to other stuff. I would probably work on that gun more in the future. But as of now, I thought it was okay. It was presentable enough. And I thought I would just kind of show it to people. And, you know, just I thought it'd be an interesting project to show people who like this. Like I said, I really want to talk about... I'm gonna have most of these digital like walkthroughs on. I'll probably have a walkthrough and then a play, you know, like where it just plays through without me talking. And I'm probably gonna have most of these on the other channel, on the sketch channel, the Sketch Monster channel. So I would subscribe to that one if you want more of those, because I'm gonna be doing a lot pretty soon, very soon, because I just got a Storybird account. If you don't know what Storybird is, go check that out. I got one of those, and I'm gonna do a lot more digital like stuff, digital, you know, illustration stuff. But yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening. If you actually listen to it this long, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed, because I tend to watch demos that are like 3 hours long. You know, like I try to make this an hour at least. I mean, an hour, you know, around an hour, because I knew 2 to 3 hours is insane, right? I try to make it about an hour. And yeah, that's about it, guys. If you guys enjoyed that video, on the top left corner, I'm gonna put a playlist of Mario characters and video game type characters. So look up at that. It's a whole playlist of stuff like that. That's on traditional paper. I believe the Sonic one is digital, but I don't think I'm talking through it too much. But yeah, check that out. On the top right corner, there's my other channel, Enzyme Art, is a new channel. It's a little bit of a passion project. It's taught in a different way. I get in front of a white screen. It's presented in a very different way, more like curriculum. So check that out if you haven't. We have about 14 videos up. I just put a new video up right now. And then the bottom right-hand corner is the Armadillo pencil case. It's a pencil case that we started on Kickstarter 2 years ago, and it sells very well even now. And I'm so happy with that experience. And it was probably one of my favorite experiences so far in my life, was doing that. And if you want to support us, check that out as well. And the final note, we have a Patreon. If you thought this video was worth at least $1, a month, like go to our Patreon, donate if you can. If not, don't worry about it. You're still gonna get the same information, really. It's just that there's minor perks to donating in Patreon. But that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you watching this, and I'll see you next time.